Hello guys and gals, and welcome. So today we're going to be looking at a very interesting shield, one that is not a paladin only shield, but it is a shield that you'll probably see a paladin wear, but only in very specific circumstances. And as we cover this shield and we talk about what this shield is capable of, you guys will be like, sound like a Minecraft villager. And you'll see why as we go over this shield. Now, it definitely does have some interesting uses, but at the same time, it's like, You think I'm joking? So right off the bat, you'll notice that Medusa's gauge is an Aegis. The Aegis is the highest level tower shield in the game. And as far as I know, I think it's the highest strength requirement shield in the game, unless it's the ward shield. I'm not 100% sure on that. Of course, it doesn't really matter because the strength requirement on this shield is 219, which is redonkulous. Most characters will never have 219 strength, not even with abilities and items that give them bonuses, like for instance, Breath of the Dying. And if you notice, when I take off Breath of the Dying, I no longer have the strength required to wear this item. I actually have bonus strength from quite a few sources, more so than I originally had remembered. And as I go over my equipment and I start to look at my bonuses to strength, you'll see that I have things like the torch, I've got the Annihilist charm, I've got the weapon, I've got the Mars kaleidoscope. And before you know it, I'm down to 179 strength, and I'm still not completely gone from my plus to strength. So there we go. 178 is my actual real strength number. And this is important because if you're looking at wearing this shield, there's a good chance you're probably not going to actually put in 219 hard strength points. But you will be putting in enough strength to put it on, obviously. Now, Medusa's gaze can come Ethereal, and when it spawns Ethereal, it will have much higher defense with 10 lower on the strength requirement. So we're looking at 209. I didn't have a Ethereal version just standing by, so I wanted to look at this shield like this first. Now, the stats on this thing are the most interesting thing about the Medusa's gaze. So, looking at the 219 strength requirement and the level 76 requirement, those are the downsides. Those are the things that make you look at this shield and go, hey, I'm probably not going to use this shield. But then we get to the effects that it actually has, and the effects on this are actually kind of ridiculously good. So right off the bat, we have a 10% chance to cast level 7 lower resist when struck. And this will proc like all the time. Ranged attacks, I've even had it proc on chain lightning, believe it or not, and lightning. This effect procs a hell of a lot more than I ever thought it would. And as a paladin who runs a 75% block, I originally thought that this was going to be a bad choice because I'm like, well, I'm just going to block all the time. It's not going to proc, and I won't get the effect of the low resist. But quite to the contrary, I see it proc all the time on a regular basis. We also have the interesting look of the shield too. I know you guys have noticed, but I zoomed in on it for you guys, and that is the very interesting look. It kind of looks like a Saigon shield, except it's got the red. I think Saigon's is a different color. It's was it white? So let's go ahead and grab a butt ton of potions because we're going to need them. We're going to be showing off this lower resist. Now, before we go down to the area, let's take a look at what level 7 lower resist does. So level 7 lower resist is a 8.6 yard radius, which is fairly large, a duration of 32 seconds, which is fairly long, and a negative resistance of 51%. Now, you might be asking yourself, well, why am I using this as a paladin? Well, the answer is because I am a conviction paladin, and conviction paladins have a massive amount of elemental damage thanks to the skill Vengeance. So what I am doing is I'm using the Medusa's gaze to bridge the gap between conviction's cutoff point and the magic number that I want. So when you have a monster can only have negative 100% to their resistance, but they can also have positive 100% to their resistance. Now, when they hit 100%, they are immune, but if they are only at 99%, and they are not at 100%, other effects can be used to bring that number down. So what I do as a Conviction Paladin is I'm bringing them down by 150%, which is going to bring them from 99. You know what? Let's bring up a calculator for dramatic effect, shall we? The dramatic effect calculator. Yes. So we have here. What is it? It's like numbers on there. There's no numbers on my calculator. Is there a second calculator? There's a second calculator. Haha. Clink, 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 clink. So let's say, for instance, we have a monster that's 99% lightning resistant, or 99% cold resistant, or 99% fire resistant. It doesn't matter. And we apply our negative 150% to that monster. He is now at negative 51%. We want him to be negative 100%. We want all the damage that we can squeeze out of this monster. So low resist applies its negative 51%, and we are now at negative 102, which means that we are past the negative 100% barrier, and which is exactly where I want to be. I want to make sure that any monster that I'm fighting is at least at negative 100% resistances, if they can be. Now we have more formulas though. So for instance, Conviction cannot bring down a monster's resistance past immunities at negative 150%. It is applied a penalty. So if we have a monster who is immune to lightning or who is immune to fire, I don't think cold usually breaks, so I'm going to avoid that one. So we have to apply a penalty of 80% to the negative 150. So negative 150, so we minus 80% to this penalty, and we will end up with negative 30%, which is exactly how much resistance you can have when it comes to the breaking of immunities. So if I have a monster who is 110% immune to lightning and I apply Conviction to him, the penalty is assumed and the monster has his resistance reduced. So for instance, let's take this 110 resistant monster. We're going to subtract 30 from him. He goes down to 80. Lower resistance applies at negative 51%. However, the negative 51% also suffers the penalty. So 51% minus 80% equals 10.2. So we're getting a, let's do that one more time. So just to make sure, because I don't trust my numbers. Negative 80%. Oh yeah, so 10.2. All right, so we add that to our 30%. So instead of breaking him by 30, we're breaking the monster by 10.2, which is 40.2. So we have a 110 monster minus 40.2. 110 minus 40.2. So we're looking at 69.8, which is a lot better. And then other things can apply, like Crescent Moon, Griffin's Eye Diadem, so forth and so on. Those negative resistance items, cold facets, fire facets, lightning facets, that sort of thing. Now, this effect is really, really nice because as a Conviction Paladin, all my damage is coming from my elemental attacks. And I'm also using an elemental merc for that exact same purpose. And as you can see, when I'm standing still with melee monsters, it doesn't tend to proc very much. And this is fine because, quite honestly, I don't need to proc it all the time. But when it does proc, it is extremely valuable to me. You'll also notice, though, that when you run around, I don't know if you guys have seen my video, you notice she has the lower resistance proc. I don't know if you've seen my video about running penalties, but when you run around, you lose your defense, you lose a huge portion of your block chance, and if you're just trying to get your lower resistance to proc, you can do a little bit of running around to make sure it happens. And as you can see here, we've got the lower resistance proc. So these monsters are now negative 200 or negative 100% to their resistance, which means that I can deal double damage to them in any type of form of elements that I'm dishing out. Of course, if they are immune, it is going to be a different story, but it does not matter what the resistance the monster has. I'm in the money. Now, of course, it's overkill for certain monsters. Certain monsters who are only like 20% resistant or 30% resistant to an element, it's completely overkill, and Conviction would do the job. But what I'm doing is I'm trying to min-max, essentially, my Conviction Paladin to squeeze the most damage I can out of it. When I come across those monsters that are difficult to kill, I don't like it. So I want them to die a little bit faster. So this is the main draw of Medusa's Gaze. And if you were to find an ethereal version of this, I suppose you could put a Zod rune in it if you wanted to, for the extra defense. The lower strength requirement would be a welcome addition for Medusa's Gaze. But honestly, I don't think the ethereal version could see much use. The Act 3 Mercenary, which I'm actually running, has a relatively low strength. He's level 90 right now, and he only has 153 strength, and I just don't reasonably see how I could get his strength level to 219. And keep in mind that he's actually using a amethyst in his helmet for plus 10 strength to help him wear his shield, which is 146. So getting him to 219 would be next to impossible. You would need something like an Endariel's socketed with an amethyst, or a giant skull socketed with 2 amethysts, and maybe even some amethysts in his armor, and then he'd possibly be able to use it. But after you've given up all those sockets just for plus the strength equipment, is it really worth it to put the Medusa's Gaze on him? At that point, he's not going to be doing enough damage to actually even be worthwhile. And as you can see, I can barely get my equipment on here as it is. I have a Spirit Conquest Sword, I've got a Spirit Monarch, I've got an Ethereal Skin of the Viper Magi, and an Ethereal Nightwing's Veil. So he's doing fairly well as he is, and he can just use my lower resist, and he can just use my Conviction. That works out much better for him anyway in the long run. So what other effects does Medusa's Gaze have on it? What's the sweetener to the pot? The lower resist is why you come to the Medusa's Gaze, but what other effects are making you stay? Well, we have a life resistance, a lifesteal, life resistance. That's pretty funny. I have lifesteal of 5 to 9% on this item. So mine in particular actually rolled very low on the lifesteal, which is sad. I would have rather preferred to have the 9%, but you get what you get. We also have slows target by 20% on here, which slows target is amazing to have. There has never been a situation where I was like, ew, slows target, I don't want that effect. No, because slows target is amazing. Slows target is going to help you tremendously from a crowd control standpoint. It's going to help you tremendously from a DPS standpoint. It's going to hold the monsters still longer and allow you to hit them, especially when you're dealing with monsters that run away a lot. Being able to slow them down is a huge benefit. This actually stacks with other slowing effects as well. So if you have a Clay Golem, if you've got Decrepify, if you've got any other form of slows target by, like Holy Freeze or slows target on an item on your mercenary, whatever it may be, you're going to stack these effects, and they're going to stack up to 80%, which is really nice. They don't stack on top of each other, so if one has 20% and the other guy has 40%, it doesn't just immediately equal 60%. It actually applies differently, so the monster will be reduced, and then your slow will affect the reduced number, since it is a percentage, and it will stack that way until it reaches the cap of 80%. We also have a defense bonus of 150 to 180%, and mine is 153%. And as you can see here, mine spawned relatively crappily. I might have to see if I can find myself another Medusa's Gaze, because mine spawned with the rock bottom 5% lifesteal and the pretty much rock bottom enhanced defense of 153%. It's only 3% above the bottom. We also have a cold resistance of 40 to 80%. So again, spawned extremely low on the cold resistance at 46%. Man, this is like the worst Medusa's Gaze I think I've ever seen. It's still good though. I still like it for the lower resist proc, but you know what? I think I might try and find myself a better roll on this. Keep in mind this one was given to me for free, so I can hardly complain. Thank you, Onyx. We also have a 100% chance to cast level 44 Nova when you die, which is when you die effects are always kind of stupid. I never really enjoyed them. Now I want to do Medusa's Gaze. I really do. So what would the Ethereal version be defense-wise? Let's work these numbers out real quick. Let me go ahead and pull up a calculator, and we're going to do a quick calculation on the defense. So the first thing we need is the base defense of the Aegis, and the base defense of an Aegis is anywhere between 145 to 161. So let's pretend for a second that we found a 161% Aegis. We would add 50% for the Ethereal value to the 161, which is 241.5. And then on the Medusa's Gaze, we have an effect of 150 to 180% ED. Let's assume that this is 180% ED item, so we're going to look for max roll. So plus 180% enhanced damage is going to give us a total defense of 676.2. So not exactly the most amazing defense bonus there. However, if you pay attention to the way that Paladins work, Paladins have a holy shield, which if you look at my defense now, it's only 2,432. However, once I cast Holy Shield, you notice my defense goes up to 1,000 or 12,524. And every point of defense has a really huge effect on this. Even if I take off something as simple as Bramble Mitts, which is 85 defense, you'll notice my defense goes down by like 500. So that small amount of defense bonus from the Ethereal version is kind of interesting. Maybe if I found a perfect, like 180% ED, 9% lifesteal, 80% cold resist, Ethereal Medusa's Gaze, I might put a Zod in that and just have some fun with it. Does this shield have any use case scenario on other characters besides a Paladin? Right off the top of my head, if you were a Fireclaw Druid, I could see this being viable. You would need something relatively fast in your main hand, and you would be using the Medusa's Gaze to proc the Lore Resist, which I think would be really helpful for a Shapeshifter Druid in that particular scenario. Because you're relying mainly on your fire damage, and having Lore Resist is definitely going to be nice to enhance that fire damage as well as potentially break some immunities. The high strength requirement, though, is going to be a bit of a hurdle there. But, hopefully if you're using something like maybe a Breath of the Dying, which does have plus 30 to all attributes, it might not be so difficult. Combined with Mara's, which is plus 5, you're looking at 35 to strength right there. And then if you have a decent torch, you could get 20. If you happen to find 20 all attributes, doesn't have to be all 20 all res, just 20 all attributes would serve. And then of course the Annihilus Charm will add in a little bit more strength as well. So I mean it's an interesting choice for a fire skill, a Fire Claw Druid. We also have to think about other classes. And normally when you think about a class that has really high elemental damage, someone who would gain the benefit of lower resistance, you think about like a sorceress. But I just don't see a sorceress ever getting high enough strength to be able to use this. And then the other thing is even if the sorceress could get high enough strength to use this, why would they be in there getting beat up to have it proc? See, a Fireclaw Druid makes sense. He's a melee character. A Paladin makes sense. He's a melee character. Maybe this could be useful for like a Bear Sorceress or something, or like a Zeal Sorceress, who's utilizing her elemental damage, her enchant, and just in general would like to have lower resist on top of maybe an Infinity Merc, which gives conviction. I think overall, when you look at this shield, a lot of people are going to instantly say, this is too high a strength requirement. I think that's the main issue with Medusa's Gaze, is it really is too high of a strength requirement. And for that purpose, I feel like we should take a look and see what the strength would be if we threw a Hell Rune in it. So Hell Runes are negative 15% requirements in equipment, and I feel like if you were really going to put a something in this with negative requirements, you're probably going to see if you can find like a really nice negative requirements jewel, something that has some other effects on it. They're not relatively hard to come by. I don't have one laying around, I don't think. Let me just double check. 50% IS with 5 max damage. But it's going to look something like this. It's going to be a probably a rare jewel, most likely with negative 15% requirements, and then with a whole bunch of other little stupid craps on it. And you're going to put that in the shield because it's going to be better than the Hell Rune. And we have what 219. Back to the calculator again. 219 minus 15% requirements is 186.15. So 186 is definitely, we can round it up to 187. 187 strength is definitely a lot more doable than 219. I feel like that is a number that could be achievable by most melee characters through the use of plus strength attribute equipment, and definitely would make it more in the realm of a possibility for maybe a bear sorceress or something like that. But see, the problem with those particular sorceresses is they tend to use Dream, and Dream is going to be a massive amount of lightning damage. So they're not necessarily worried about the lower resistance as they are worried about trying to beef up the damage that they're outputting. And I don't know. At 80% cold resistance is kind of ridiculous. You see I put a topaz in there to balance out the resistances. I was having trouble with lightning, but I was having no trouble with cold when I put this shield on. So I balanced out the resistances with a topaz instead of putting like a diamond or something in there, because the resistances on this are so offset toward the cold resistance that then I just was like, okay, well, how can I take off as much cold resistance as possible so I can actually wear this thing and still be not be like super duper overprotected from cold resistance, which has just made me think of a very interesting use for this shield. Is if you found the 80% cold resistance version, you could put a socket in this, throw more cold resistance on top. For instance, throw a perfect sapphire in there for another 40%, so that's 80, 90, 100, 110, 120, so 120% cold resistance. And why would you do this? Well, for PvP. So sorceresses have a massive negative resistance on their equipment, their cold mastery, and the cold mastery effect can go to a ridiculous like 200% or higher negative resistance. And so even if you're sitting at like 95% cap, when you're fighting a cold sorceress, the cold is piercing most of your resistances, and having an overprotection of cold resistance is actually extremely important when you're fighting a sorceress who's using cold mastery. So something like this that can give you a 140% whopping cold resistance would be perfect to whip out in a situation when you are fighting a cold sorceress. Also, the lower resistance might come in handy if you're dealing some kind of elemental damage. But just in general, it seems like a decent choice when fighting a cold sorceress. I'm trying to think if there's any other character that could really get a good use out of this. Maybe a martial arts assassin who's really into the elemental damage. I mean, one of the kicks does fire damage, and this would be useful for that. One of several of the abilities do lightning, cold, and fire. You also have Phoenix Strike, which does all three elements. And I feel like there's a lot of elemental damage there and a lot of possibilities for lower resist to really help out on the damage. Of course, martial arts assassins tend to be a conglomeration of everything, and I don't know if you guys have heard, but they are looking at fixing martial arts assassins in the latest patch of 2.4. So do go take a look at that video I have up for the martial arts assassin information. There's a lot more on there, by the way, so do be sure to stop by and take a look. It's filled with good information like new Heroic Cube recipes, new rune words, all sorts of stuff that eventually I will have to cover in videos. As always, I do appreciate you guys and gals watching my videos, and if you like today's video, make sure you hit the thumbs up button. Consider hitting the subscribe button and the bell as well, because I do put out content on a regular basis. As always, thanks for watching, and keep watching.